So you are probably thinking, how can I even contemplate 2026 when I'm in the throes of the holiday season of 2025? But it's just around the corner. And perhaps you need a little bit of inspiration on how to make next year even better than this year was. Well, if you are indeed looking for that, I have a great conversation for you that will get you well on your way. It's with Guy Kawasaki, who was one of my first guests here on Speaker Dynamics on the Room. And it's a conversation that I think is pretty timely right now. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Karin Reed. I'm a 4-time author, Emmy Award-winning broadcast journalist, and communication expert on helping people to own the room, whether it be a physical one or a virtual one. Welcome to Speaker Dynamics. You know, there's the old saying that says never meet your heroes, but I would say that that is not always the case, especially in the case I'm about to share with you. I was able to have Guy Kawasaki come on this show, and Guy is a titan in the tech world, but he is also a communication guru who I have looked up to from the start of my career. And he came on the show and talked to me about all things communication, but more importantly, about his latest book, Think Remarkable. And he talks about his friendship with Jane Goodall, who passed this past year, and it made me think of him again. He talked about people who are larger than life. But what I liked best about our conversation was the fact that he said anybody can be remarkable if they simply seek to make a difference. So with that bit of inspiration, I'm going to allow you to listen one more time to one of my favorite conversations ever on Speaker Dynamics on the Room. Enjoy. Guy Kawasaki, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, what better thing to do than be on your podcast on a Friday?
Okay, that is a very kind, generous thing to say. I can think of a lot of things actually for me to be doing other than being on my podcast, but I appreciate you taking the time.
I don't want to take up your time. We can end right now.
Peace out, mic drop. No, but that would not be fair to our listeners. It really wouldn't. But I am really excited to talk to you about your 16th book, which when that landed in my inbox, I thought, oh my gosh, he has written so much. I've written 4, and I thought that's 4 more than I ever imagined I would. Wow. 16, that's crazy. So Think Remarkable.
Well, I'm a lot older than you, so...
But Guy, I'm like, I cannot write another book. Maybe my co-author.
I said that 15 times.
What actually did shock me, though, was the width of the book. It is jam-packed with really impactful takeaways throughout, to the point where it's basically all highlighted in pink. I don't think there's any black and white left.
I should tell people to redact my book because there's so much good stuff. It'd be easier to cross out the stuff you don't want.
I agree. I think that's actually a brilliant idea. And it honestly, I was telling you in our pre-call that I was reading it to my kids because there's stuff in there for every situation.
Well,
my children
Karin, I hate to tell you, but the goal is for you to buy it for your kids, not read it to your kids. Okay, just FYI.
That can happen as well.
Okay.
But they need to get out of the house first, and then I can say, look, here's your present.
Don't you love them enough to give them their own copy?
I guess I do. That's true. That's true. But a parting gift sounds like a good idea as well. But
take this. See you later. Tell me when I have grandchildren.
Exactly right. So the book, it's written in a slightly different format than your others. It's very condensed, which I think is very helpful. For those of us everyone is tight on time. But what I've seen across all your work, whether it is your 10-20-30 rule, or just the way you speak on your podcast, it seems to me that you value concision in communication.
I do.
Okay.
And
tell me why.
I was especially conscious of this because the intended market, the primary market, is Gen Z. And so, in the introduction, I say that this is TikTok. This is not TED Talk. And, this is, if you have to understand or know some books, but this is not the Chicago Manual of Style. This is the Elements of Style. And people who are in writers, they know the difference between what I just said. So, and it's, I've written and read many business books, and often there are 200 pages to get one concept to you. And that's not at all what I'm doing. There's 88 concepts in this book, and there's 180 pages. So it's 2 pages each.
It makes it challenging to do an interview with you because I feel like I could dive into any of those 88 concepts.
You could. And you know what? I can make it even easier for you. I have Kawasaki GPT that has the manuscript in it. So you could just go there and ask me questions.
Wait, can we actually talk about that? Because, all right, mentioned that I wrote books. I did not use Chat GPT, and I'm like, dang, I missed out on an opportunity.
You missed out.
To make my life easier. Tell me how you used it and what prompted you to do it that way.
So I used it in many ways. One way is as a research assistant. So, for example, I needed more case studies of people who had made big career shifts. So I asked ChatGPT that, and it said Julia Child used to be a spook, and then she became a French chef. I had no idea. I didn't know that. So that's one example. I also use something called Quillbot to tighten up and change my writing in places. I used Claude to summarize things because I believe that at the end of every section, you need to summarize what happened in that section. And it's a very difficult process. I don't know why it's so hard, but it's hard for you. Like mentally, you just wrote what you want people to do. And now you got to think, I got to say that in another way that's not repetitive, but is repetitive. And LLMs are very good at doing that. So some writers, they are suspicious, or maybe they are jealous, or maybe they are hostile towards AI. And that's not the case for me at all. I believe that my responsibility to the reader is to produce the best book that I can. And whether that is using LLMs or not is not the point. The point is to get the best book. And so when people ask me about this, I tell them to use a cooking analogy. When you go to a restaurant, you don't go in the back and you say, okay, you're using a microwave, you're using a food processor, you're using an electric knife, you're using a convection oven. I don't want to eat here. I want people who only use knives and charcoal, right? I mean, you don't care why your meal is great. You just want it to be great. And that's my logic with my writing.
That's amazing. And this is all about leadership communication on this podcast. Do you have any words of advice for the leaders out there who might think communicating using ChatGPT is just not authentic?
Karin, the key to authenticity is once you can fake authenticity, you really got it made. All right. So, I mean, that's like saying to let's pretend this is before LLMs and before AI. And you said to a leader, you cannot use a speechwriter, because when you use a speechwriter, it's no longer authentic. Somebody else wrote that speech for you. I'm telling you, Barack Obama had speechwriters. I interviewed them for my podcast. So this is before LLMs. Now, what's the difference between an LLM writing your speech and a speechwriter? I don't see any difference.
Yeah.
I don't see it. So it's like, with the speechwriter or the LLM, you got to tell it what you want it to say, and then it helps you say it better. Sounds good to me.
Yeah. And I guess it's back to the idea of like garbage in, garbage out, where, if you put in a crappy prompt that doesn't give them enough to work with, then, what you get on the other side is also going to be pretty crappy as well. But I wanted to take you back to your origin story. You were the original Apple evangelist.
I was second.
Were you second? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the whole history of evangelism is, first there was Jesus, and then there was Mike Boich, and then there was Guy. So you could say I'm the third coming.
Excellent. Okay. So you were the third evangelist. So you were there, though, whenever they unveiled the Think Different campaign, which I did not know. Like how amazing that was. And is that the reason why you chose the title for this book, Think Remarkable?
Listen, you as an author, you know that one of the hardest things to do is pick the title. And even harder than the title is the subtitle, because, the title sometimes screams out at you, but the subtitle, everybody wants to throw everything in, who is it for? It's got to be for everybody. It's got to explain what it is and blah, blah, blah. Pretty soon the subtitle is bigger than the introduction. So I went back and forth with dozens of titles asking people, what do you think? Should I just call it How to Be Remarkable? I thought about Remarkable You. I thought about just Remarkable. I thought about, remarkableness and all that. And then finally, somebody who, believe it or not, is a divorce lawyer of all things, he said, well, why don't you copy the ad campaign and call it Think Remarkable? And that's when the lights went off. I said, you absolutely right. That is freaking perfect. And the subtitle, which is 9 Paths to Transform Your Life and Make a Difference. I didn't like that subtitle. I was forced into that subtitle. If it was up to me, the subtitle would be the title would be Think Remarkable: How to Make a Difference. But they wanted to stick in 9 ways to transform your life. And then now we're really going off the deep end here, but
that's okay.
If I could do it all over again and I had total control, I would call it Think Remarkable: How to Murder Your Mediocrity. And the reason why is I love liquid death. Do you know what liquid death is? The water?
No. What is liquid death?
Enlighten
me and enlighten the listeners.
Where do you live?
I live in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Oh, I don't know if there's liquid death in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Okay.
Might be the death of democracy in North Carolina, but in women's rights, but
it's not that kind of podcast, Guy. All right. We'll talk about that at a different time. All right. But okay, tell me what liquid death is, though.
Okay. So a few years ago, I decided that my family has to be putting less plastic into the world. So I wanted, and we used to buy a lot of bottled water. And so I went to Amazon, I typed in, water in aluminum cans, and up comes liquid death. And so I buy a case and I loved it. It's a very subtle taste, and it's in cans. You'll love this because you have kids in their 20s. It's in cans that look like beer cans. So when you're at a party and you're drinking liquid death, most people would think you're drinking beer, but you're drinking water. And if you don't believe me, you go buy a case of liquid death. Amazon has it. I subscribe to liquid death on Amazon. You go buy a case of liquid death, you open it up, and you go driving holding that can. And I guarantee you in North Carolina, you're going to get pulled over. I guarantee you.
And I'll say, Guy Kawasaki made me drink this.
That's right. That's right. And they're going to say, who? Right. So, so now, wait. So I got to tell you. So now, Liquid Death's corporate slogan is "Murder Your Thirst." And I thought, that's kind of a very memorable thing. So I was like, wow, I love that concept of marketing, this kind of slightly bizarre, macabre marketing. I said, I'm going to say "Murder Your Mediocrity." So that's how I got to that.
I really like that subtitle. If I were on your list of editors, I would have been like, Guy, that's perfect. Do that. But I understand. Why.
But can I tell you? Okay. Yeah. Going further off into the weeds.
Yep.
So when I started, making speeches, and I would call it How to Murder Your Mediocrity, I really thought right away I would get a lot of pushback from people who said, my grandfather was murdered. It's PTSD. You're bringing back murder into the vernacular. It's ruining, it's negative. It's violent. It's, you're whatever, right? And in all the exposure of How to Murder Your Mediocrity and all that, I've had one person say that. Now, that doesn't mean that nobody else thinks that.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, like rational, intelligent people like you, they come out and say, that is a great name of a speech. So it's not that people are just benign neglect or they're ignoring it or they're too subtle to say anything to Guy. They actively like that title.
That's great. And honestly, in this day and age, I think if there were a lot of people who did not like it, you definitely would have heard about it. It's social, the age of social media, it would have been all over the place. So, but let's talk a little bit about what's inside the book rather than, the title, which I think is also fabulous. But you based it upon a lot of your interviews that you did through the podcast, where you get these amazing people on there who some are household names, some are not. But what do you feel like is like the one thing that makes them remarkable? What is kind of like the guiding principle for those who...
Well, believe it or not, the way I structured the book into 3 pieces, which is growth, grit, and grace. Basically, that's the common points that after interviewing more than 200 people, they all had the growth mindset. They were willing to learn new things. And part of the growth mindset is if you're willing to learn a new thing, you got to be gritty because it ain't going to be easy. Mm-hmm. And then towards the end of their lives or careers or after they achieve some success, they quickly turned into this kind of grace and graciousness mode where they wanted to pay back society. Mm-hmm. So the 3 common points are growth, grit, and grace. And I love tricolons and I love alliteration. And I think one of the heights of my writing career is to come up with a tricolon alliteration. And not just the first letter alliteration, but the first 2 letters.
Growth, grit, grace. Yeah.
Yeah. Growth, grit, grace. Now,
okay, it's impressive.
When I die, I'm going to call it growth, grit, grace, and grave. I have a 4-colon. I'm going to have a 4-colon.
The penultimate alliteration.
That's right.
That's great, Guy. And you have amazing examples throughout, and some of them really did stand out to me. Obviously, Jane Goodall, who wrote your foreword, and how do you think she still exudes such humility, even with the profound influence?
Let me tell you something. I just went to her birthday party 2 weeks ago, and she's 90 years old. She travels 300 days a year. I don't understand. I mean, and when I say travels 300 days a year, it's not like she's Taylor Swift and she's catching a Gulf Stream between, from the Super Bowl to the Ritz-Carlton. She works so hard, and I think she is the most remarkable person alive today. I seriously do. Yeah. And, man, it was just a blessing. It was just like blind dumb luck that she agreed to write the foreword. We are friends, but still, there are friends and there are friends, right? And she agreed to write the foreword, and then I did this free course for Canva about how to be remarkable, and she recorded a video for that course from Africa for me, and how did I get to deserve this? I don't know, but you know what? I'm taking it.
Well, absolutely. But one of the things that you also said that I thought was really a valuable lesson is you said becoming remarkable isn't the objective for remarkable people. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yes. So I think that in the age of many self-help books and self-help people, that the concept is you can read this book, not this book, but a book. You can read a book and you can reposition yourself, rebrand yourself, and then convince people that you are remarkable by doing you write white papers, you write books, you speak at TEDx. These are the techniques to become perceived as remarkable. Mm-hmm. And I got to tell you, there is nothing in that book that says, go give a TED talk. There's nothing in that book that says, go write a book. There's nothing in that book to go reposition yourself. I think all of those are putting lipstick on a pig. Okay. So my concept is that if you want to be remarkable, the way you do that is you make a difference. You make the world a better place. And if you make the world a better place, maybe it's because you made a great computer, or maybe because you figured out that chimpanzees have a social life, or maybe because you make great paintings. When you make a difference, then the natural outcome is people will think you are remarkable. And listen, I know Jane and I knew Steve, and I would be astounded if ever in their life they woke up and they said, how can I make people think I'm remarkable?
Yeah.
That kind of shallow, ego-driven thinking, just it's not in their book, so to speak.
Yeah.
So if you want to be remarkable, just freaking do good and make a difference.
You're my first person I have to beep. Guy.
Yeah, okay. I'll tell you another great story then. I'm going to give you another beepable moment. This is a great story.
Okay.
So I've had 225 guests, right? And among them is Gary Vaynerchuk.
Sure.
So you would have thought the first person to drop an F-bomb on Guy's Remarkable podcast would be Gary V. Yeah. Let me tell you something. Of all people in the world, it was Margaret Atwood.
What?
Margaret Atwood dropped the first F-bomb on my podcast. And let me tell you the circumstance.
Okay. So I was like, if he said Jane Goodall, I am mic dropping. And I'm
yeah. Well, it would be even better if it was Jane, but sorry, it was Margaret.
Yeah.
I'm interviewing Margaret Atwood. I'm saying, so Margaret, tell me how you write a book. How do you do that? Do you use a word processor? Are you writing it? And then, how do you get feedback? Or is it perfect when you turn it into your editor and your editor just fawningly falls in love with it, retypes it and publishes it? She says, no, when I write a book, I often give it to people who are like the characters in the book. So they can give me a reality check about, would a character like me, a yuppie, behave like this or whatever?
Right.
So she tells me, yeah. So she wrote about this young person and she had a person who was kind of like the character, read what the character said. And the character said something like, what was the phrase? It was, oh God, I gotta look this up in the file. It's something about, go F yourself or, something like that. And the character absolutely used the F word wrong, that nobody says that. So Margaret Atwood says, this character said this, and the guy who read it and told me, Margaret, people don't use the F word of my age at that way. They use it this way. So he said it, and then that's how Margaret Atwood dropped the first F-bomb in my podcast.
That's classic. So technically she was quoting someone. It wasn't
technically, yes. But she dropped it. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, I'm glad that you were my first beepable guest. I think that makes you remarkable in and of itself.
So someday when you're, more famous than Joe Rogan, you can say, who the first person I had to beep on my podcast was Guy Kawasaki.
Guy Kawasaki.
And you know what people are going to say? Who's Guy Kawasaki?
No, they will not. I disagree with you on that. But this podcast, we talk a lot about communication. One of the things that we often mention is like that inner critic, that voice inside your head that is judging everything you're saying and doing, competing with the one coming out of your mouth. And you talk about Julia Cameron's fictionalized Nigel. I love that she gives a name to her inner crich.
Unless I'm hallucinating, balloons just went by.
I would love to know why, but it's some sort of...
Oh, you didn't do that on purpose?
No, I don't know why it does that. So, folks, if you're in the audience,
you just say her name and creative things happen.
Balloons go off, yes. So, she said, though, that she calls this person Nigel, and it helps her to kind of get past the inner critic. How do you, combat your own inner critic?
Well, I gotta be honest, Cara. I mean, I don't have an inner critic like that telling me that I cannot do something. Seriously.
Okay.
I have an inner critic in me telling me that, let's take surfing as example. I am the most critical person of my own surfing that I know. I know everything that I've done wrong, and I'm trying to fix so many things. But that's
you took
different.
it up really late in life, Guy. Like, right?
So what?
Yeah.
So what?
Okay. All right.
Okay. So
No,
I am very critical of what I know. If you're a surfer, my pop-up is just fundamentally flawed. I know it's fundamentally flawed, and I'm trying to fix it for years. And so there's a kind of inner critic that says, Guy, you are too old to surf. I don't have that kind of inner critic. Obviously, I took up surfing at 60, but I have the kind of inner critic that says, Guy, your pop-up sucks. So this is a different kind of critic. You know, you could have a critic that says, you don't have a PhD in English. You have not taken a course in writing. You cannot write a book. That's Nigel, right? That's the kind of inner critic that can stop growth. But there's another kind of inner critic that says, listen, your book, it has too many adverbs. It has too many adjectives. You use the passive voice too much, right? So, like the writing is not clear. And you use just overuse metaphors and similes. So, you have passive voice. You're saying it was a dark and stormy night. Well, that is like a meaningless phrase at this point. And so, there's that kind of critic. And I think that kind of critic is actually good.
Yeah.
So
just makes
it
better.
Advice, listen, my advice, if you're dealing with Nigels, then obviously you read Julia Cameron's books. But there's also a book called If You Want to Write by Brenda Yulin. And she talks about if you want to write. Now, this is not just for writers. It's also for any creative task. So if you want to be a photographer, if you want to be a movie maker, if you want to be a surfer, just surf, just write, just make movies. Brenda Yulin's book changed my life.
Yeah. So speaking of the surfing metaphor, and I, gosh, seriously, I promised people that it'd be 30 minutes or less, and this is like flown by. But you talk about
We're
idea
at 24:49. Relax.
Yeah, but I have more things to ask you. But you talk about the surfing metaphor of turning and burning. So for those who are not familiar with that, can you explain what that means, and then how you apply it in your life?
Yes. So turning and burning mean, and it's at the very end of my book, it means that at some point, we're so used to trying to make the perfect decision and using big data and using LLMs and using 2x2 matrices and whatever you learned at McKinsey or Accenture or wherever Harvard Business School. At some point, Wayne Gretzky, or attributed to Wayne Gretzky at least, is a quote that you don't score 100% of the shots you don't take. Same thing is true of surfing. You don't catch 100% of the waves that you don't turn and paddle for. So at some point, if you want to make a difference, you just have to turn and burn. In other words, you have to turn and start paddling, and you have to actually do something as opposed to thinking about doing something.
Right.
And then the last thing I cover there is I say, like we spend too much time making the right decision. What we should do is make the decision right, which is very different, which is to say that it's impossible to make the right decision I think in most cases in life. So what you have to do is you take your best shot, you turn and burn, and then you make your decision right. That's the key.
Yeah, I love that. And what would you say was your best example of turning and burning?
Well, I surf every day, so I can tell you 20 times.
Okay, outside of surfing, but like in your professional life, like what's one where you're like, yeah, I'm glad I turned and burned on that one.
Well, podcasting. I took a podcasting. I took a podcasting 5 years ago, and podcasting is 10 years old. So I was a late comer, and I just fell in love with the concept, and I fell in love with the advantage of podcasting over writing books. Ironically, I took up podcasting figuring I'll never write another book again. But then this podcast led to writing another book because I got so much material in my podcast that I figured out that people aren't going to listen to 250 hours and read 5,000 pages of transcripts. So I have to shift from the podcast to the book. Although I shifted from the book to the podcast to give up books.
Oh, the irony. But
the irony.
But I imagine that what you get joy out of is how much you can learn from all the amazing people you have on your podcast. I mean, I feel like this is a very selfish thing that I'm doing right now. Yeah, I'm giving it out to the listeners, but like the idea of being able to sit in a room with you and talk is just amazing. Do you get that sort of thrill when you are in the studio with the people on your podcast?
I think for me, the thrill of podcasting is that I feel like I am so blessed and so lucky that if you drew a circle of people who have the ability to get to someone like Jane Goodall, I'm in that circle. There are few people in that circle, but I am one of them. I can get to Jane Goodall and Neil deGrasse Tyson and, Steve Wozniak. And then you draw another circle, and that circle is you have the life experience to know what to ask those kinds of people you have access to. That's another circle that doesn't have too many people in it. And, I think because I've had 40 years on the front line of businesses, and I also served on the board of Wikipedia and all that. So I have a lot of life context to ask questions that probably no one else or few people can ask. And I listen to NPR all the time. I love NPR. I love Wait, Don't Tell Me. I love This American Life. I love Fresh Air. I love all those things. But, sometimes you listen to the questions people ask, and it's clear that they've been a journalist or podcaster their whole life. They ask kind of like, sometimes you listen to the podcast and you hear the podcaster say, so you saw your mother kill your father when you were 10 years old. And when that happened, you were in the room and you were covered with blood. Has that affected you?
Yeah, stupid.
Well, duh, has that affected me?
As a journalist guy, I will say I've never asked those kind of questions because they're inane, but I do.
Exactly.
And I actually, I used to work with somebody, I will not say the name, who would leave the newsroom with her story already written, and she would try to get the interviewee to answer the questions to fit in the story.
Yeah.
And I thought, whoa, that is really putting, the cart in front of the horse. And I can tell you, I had a whole list of questions I was going to ask you. I think I made it to 2, but I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Well, why do you listen it to half an hour? I mean, it's not like it's
my promise to the listeners, Guy. Maybe we'll go a little longer. How about that? But
no. But your promise to the listener should be to bring to them content that will add value to their life as opposed to content that adds after 30 minutes. Yeah. Now, you could also have a case where you have a guest who doesn't have 30 minutes. So you should cut that guest short.
So true. Let it expand and contract based upon the message that they're delivering, whether it's good or not. I'm not going to say good. That's not the right term, but like valuable.
That would be like going to a restaurant and it says, you're going to have a 10-course meal and the chef wants to bring out his or her special handmade Grand Marnier souffle that you didn't order. You say, no. It was 10-course meal. I can't take that gift.
All right. Well, then indulge me for the additional, dessert that's coming to the table. So okay. I do like to always give listeners like the one big takeaway, something that they can really kind of chew on, until they get to the next episode. So, what would you want to leave our listeners with? And it can be related to Think Remarkable or just related to your amazing career that you've had thus far. What would you tell them?
Those two things are almost one and the same.
Okay.
I just want to leave your listeners with the fact that when I die, I want people to say that I helped them make a difference, whether it's podcasting, writing, investing, speaking, whatever it is. And so the message I want to leave with you is that if you want to be remarkable, step 1 is to make a difference. Make a difference. Make the world a better place. You don't need to be Steve Jobs or Jane Goodall or Neil deGrasse Tyson or Stacey Abrams or, Margaret Atwood. You don't have to have sold tens of millions of computers. The thing is that you can be remarkable by making a difference to one person, one classroom, one student, one, polluted stream, and that's good enough. That's good enough to be remarkable.
I love that. Thank you. I always think about just wanting to be a force for good, right? And I tell that to my kids, just be a force for good wherever you are, in ways big and small. And I feel like you've demonstrated in this book so many ways that people have been forces for good.
Can I give you one thing for your kids?
Yes, because I'm expanding this based upon the value of the content for my listeners. Yes.
Yes, and your listeners will thank you for it.
Okay.
So all you listeners who have kids in their late teens and 20s, I'll give you career advice for them. My career advice is that you should tell them that what they need to do is make themselves indispensable. Because when you are indispensable to a company or a person, you get more responsibilities, you get more opportunities, you get more exposure. Everything flows from that. And so they're going to ask you, well, Mom, how do I make myself indispensable? And you give them two answers. Answer number one is you just keep showing up, because most people don't keep showing up. Right there, you're ahead of 90% of the people.
Right.
The last 10% is I'm going to have to get your beeper out again. You just do the that nobody else wants to do. So you keep showing up and you do the nobody else wants to do. You will be indispensable. And I'm telling you, over the course of your career, you will succeed with that attitude.
Thank you. I think it's great advice. You actually allude to some of that in your book. That's the section I read to my kids last night. Literally. So I'm glad that you were able to share that with the listeners as well. Guy Kawasaki, I wish you all the best with this book and everything else you do. I think you belong in this book as well. And don't it's true. You're a remarkable person. You have made a huge impression on me and what I have done over the years as a communication practitioner. And I just want to appreciate everything that you do and let you know that I really am honored that you've been on the podcast today.
I'm honored to be on your podcast. And I am especially honored to be the first person to have been beeped. All right. Have a great weekend. I'm going to go surfing.
Thank you, Guy.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Do you not love Guy Kawasaki? I just adore him as a person. I think he is a genius as a communication guru. And he actually is somebody I often quote whenever I'm teaching my classes. His 10, 20, 30 rule is something I always try to preach to my clients. And I didn't have an opportunity in this half hour to dig into that, but I wanted to hear it from his mouth. And so if you are interested and want to hear about the Guy Kawasaki 10, 20, 30 rule related to slide design, this is coming from somebody who was an Apple evangelist, so they know a thing or two about design. I would encourage you to check out this week's bonus content. So if you go to speakerdynamics.com/bonus content, then you will get access to a 6-minute conversation with Guy about the 10, 20, 30 rule and how to avoid death by PowerPoint. It is so valuable. And perhaps you want to send it to your colleagues who violate that all the time. So thank you so much for allowing me to have a little bit of extra time in your day today. Hopefully you found it worthwhile. And if you are enjoying this podcast, I encourage you to tell your friends, tell your colleagues, tell anybody you think might be interested to check it out. Follow, subscribe. It helps everybody else to find us. So thank you so much for listening to this episode. Until next time.